that the operation of that worked well, but your argument is still kind of a bum argument for some other reason, and that's called an informal fallacy. It doesn't have to do with the form of the argument, right? If the form of your argument is off, then it's invalid. It has to do with the truthfulness of the argument in the statement. Does the content meaningfully and properly relate to the issue at hand? And the two most common ways to commit an informal fallacy is by confusing someone or making an irrelevant point, right? Confusion, the flow of thinking is mixed up and out of order. Irrelevant, the flow of thinking leads to a point outside of the issue being discussed. So you have before you a sheet, I think there are like 18 or 19 or something like that, informal fallacies. Different people have different lists of them. Aristotle came up with a famous list that was sort of the first one in rhetoric. I don't know if any of you have taken any classes that have seen that, but others have been added. And what we're going to do, though, is do this a little bit of a game style. Name that informal logical fallacy! And so the way this is going to work is, a statement is going to flash up on the screen, okay? And just identify the informal fallacy that you think is most clearly reflected in that statement, okay? And so we'll just sort of let hands fly up. If you get it right, then you can come pull a prize out of the mysterious bag of prizes. Okay? Oh, so there. Okay, number one. Oh, no. All right. Right. Oh, I got to put these on pause. Okay, so just as an example, as a test. So number one, ready? You are a person of faith. I, on the other hand, am a person of science and reason. This would be an example of a false dilemma or a false dichotomy. Sorry, just get my right, a false dilemma or a false dichotomy, and that's number 18 on the list, right? Where a person presents a limited number of options and assumes that no other option can exist. And so in this statement, what's been presented is there's only two choices and you have to pick one. You're either a person of faith or you are a person of science and reason, but you can be a person of both, right? Science, reason, and faith are not opposites. Okay? Many people present them as opposites, but they're not. The opposite of faith is no faith. The opposite of faith is not reason and science. Again, logically speaking, the opposite of A is negative A. The opposite of faith is no faith. Okay? The opposite of A is not B, science or reason, unless you can show and prove that that B is equal to negative A, logically speaking, right? But this is an example of false dilemma and false dichotomy. So here we go, number two. I read that most of the members of the National Academy of Sciences are atheists, so I don't take religion very seriously. What do you think? Yes?
Appeal to authority?
Appeal to authority. Come on. Come on up and bring your prize. Appeal to authority. This is trying to decide a point by referencing an authority figure. All right, so go. To encourage all. We got coffee out here. We got to make sure we encourage one another in fellowship, right? Referencing an authority figure who agrees with the point, right? And how, so most of the members of the National Academy of Sciences are atheists. And that doesn't really speak to the validity or the truth of religion. You're just telling me that because this authority figure, right? Now, sometimes this isn't a logical fallacy. If within the argument there is an agreement, like, well, so what does what do authorities say? But so what? If most of the members of the National Academy of Sciences are atheists, so what? What about the National Academy of Businessmen? Are most of them atheists? What about the National Academy of Lawyers? Are most of them atheists? You know what I mean? So what? There's lots of smart people with degrees out there that may or may not be. You know what I mean? All right, so the next one. If you study church history, you see a long tradition of violence towards dissenters, suppression of scientific truth, political corruption, wars and bloodshed. Clearly the church is anything but moral influence for good. Yes? No, not appeal to emotion. What we would call this is special pleading. Though that could be argued, but as it popped up, special pleading. Look at number 12, right? Whoops. Also called stacking the deck. Focusing on evidence that supports, I lost it, that supports a point while ignoring other relevant evidence that may contradict it. Okay? So here in this statement, the only parts of church history that are being focused on are the bad parts. But if we're going to talk about church history, we've got to talk about all the good too, don't we?
Right. Yep.
All the great things, all the magnanimous things, the charitable things, right? So you can't just take church history and say, well, look at all these bad things that happened in church history, and just let that be the point of the argument. That's special pleading, or that's stacking the deck. Church history is filled with tons and tons of good stuff as well. Come on up and claim a prize anyway. Amen. All right. Centuries before Christ, the Egyptian god Osiris was said to have died and then risen from the dead. The Jesus account is another mythical manifestation, I don't know why I keep doing it, of this same earlier story. What do you think? Yeah, post hoc, false cause fallacy.